You will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. I will pose these questions, and then each answer, let's say, what you want to agree on, 90 seconds, 2 minutes? I think 90 seconds is good. Here's how it is, gentlemen.
I feel like I'm not going to take the whole time.
All right.
I say that as someone who has never once failed to take the whole time, but there it is.
It's true. I've been to your press conferences. Just one more thing before we get to the press conference.
That's right.
So Randy Corporon and George Brauchler are here. Here's what we are talking about. And we are talking about whether or not there should be a primary next year for the Colorado GOP. And this Saturday, correct me if I say anything that's incorrect, guys, certainly let me know. But coming up this Saturday is the opportunity for a vote. So we will start. Why don't we start with Randy and tell us where you stand on this Colorado GOP primary, and we'll go from there. You have 2 minutes.
Well, sounds good. Thank you very much. I will correct what you said about not having a primary next year. Opting out of the open primary doesn't necessarily prevent us from doing a host of other things next year. But the biggest thing that brings me to the table on standing on the side of telling the Republican Party that it is time to not allow people who are not Republicans, who are not committed to the platform, to the ideas of the Republican Party. And to quote my friend George Brauchler, I think the quarterback of the other team shouldn't be picking our leaders. And it's been a very ineffective process in the last 5 years since we had open primaries. There's so much I had to create a list. We've lost 15 statewide seats, 1 U.S. Senate seat, 7 state House seats, 2 state Senate seats, a Colorado Board of Education seat, a Colorado Board of Regents seat. 23,000 Republican voters left the party. And, you know, I came to getting active in politics as a Tea Partier. Who was very skeptical of the Republican Party because I read this platform and I knew it was the party of Lincoln, and year after year I saw leaders making promises and then not standing up to them. And as I got more involved in politics, I saw that that was a serious, serious problem here in the state of Colorado. And I've gotten to know so many people around the state, grassroots activists, who are very skeptical of the Republican Party still, and many of them have opted out of affiliation with the Republican Party because they're sick to death of candidates who don't stand a chance in general elections, who have campaigned one way, and if they do manage to get elected, operate another. It's 100% unconstitutional that state law now dictates to both parties, Republicans and Democrats, that in order to opt out of their statutory system, we have to come up with a 75% majority vote, not just of the people attending the meeting, but of every single one of the Republican committee people. And so those are a couple of the reasons. I'm sure we'll get into a lot more. You bet. Randy Corporon, thank you. And now to George for his opening 2-minute statement.
Everything that guy just said is... No, I'm kidding. I was going my cousin Vinny there. Listen, I'm a lifelong Republican, and I want to win. This is not the way to do it. I'll say this. I think Randy and I can agree on a couple things. One, that wasn't quite my quote. My quote was, I don't think people who reject wearing a team's jersey ought to have a hand in picking who their leaders would be. That's not letting the other side or the enemy pick it, but the point is the same. I'd love to have a situation where in the past we'd had just Republicans picking Republican nominees. That makes total sense to me. We don't have that right now, but what we do have is every single registered Republican has the opportunity to participate in the nominating process. And what we're being asked to do is to forego that for the unknown. Now, and I know Randy will talk about options, but that's what you get. You're going to get talk about, if we opt out, we could do this. It might mean we have a primary. We could try to expand the number. All of these things that we don't know the answers to. So instead of a system where we know la-di-da-di everybody that's a Republican gets a ballot and gets to have a say in this, we're going to take a party and we're going to let about 300 people on Saturday make the decision, less than that really if we get to 75%, make the decision for the rest of the party that the establishment inside the party will be the ones to dictate who the nominees are for the party. I frankly don't think that is a path to success. I don't think it's ever proven to be a path to success. But if you look at the numbers, and Randy cited some, and they're important, what you need to know is before the state of Colorado ever voted to go to this open primary process. The Republican Party from 2010 to 2016 lost 6% of the electorate. Since 2016, they've lost 6% of the electorate. So to suggest that the loss of registration in the state of Colorado as a percentage of the electorate is a function of the fact that we've gone to open primaries is belied. It's absolutely refuted by the statistics. At the end of the day, I want maximum participation by Republicans in picking these. It's the only way you can get an outsider to compete with the party.
George Brauchler, Randy Corporon. This is the GOP, Colorado GOP primary debate here on 710 KNUS, and we are glad you're with us. We'll still take our normal news breaks coming up, but we will do this for the hour. No phone calls, but if you have a question you would like asked, I can't give you any guarantees, but certainly text the studio via the free-to-download 710 KNUS app. So in our format, what we'll do is, I think we agree, we'll do 90 seconds. With the first question, and George, let's start with you, and then we'll get to Randy. One of the things, sustained. How do you get around, or is there a problem with alienating those unaffiliated voters?
I think there probably is, especially when you see that they're the fastest growing portion of the statewide electorate. And if you look at under 25 years old, it's ridiculous. More than 50% of the registered voters are unaffiliated. They just don't want to wear a jersey. Now, that doesn't mean I want them to pick our candidate, but if the alternative is to reject them and put them in a process where the only primary they can compete in is the other side's, that's not good for us either. I mean, I can't tell you how many social studies are out there that say the person that you vote for in the primary is the person you're most likely to ride through the finish line. That's a big deal. But I think even on a lesser scale, if you talk about just who's going to get a ballot, right now our system is set up so that unaffiliateds get both ballots, and they get to pick one. They have to pick only one. If they don't get a Republican ballot, the only thing they've gotten there is some free advertising for a candidate that they have a chance to weigh in on. And I got to tell you, if I'm invited to go to a buffet, I'd much rather go to a buffet where someone has said, what do you want to see on the menu, rather than just say, show up and we'll tell you what you're going to eat. And that's what I think we're dealing with here.
Randy, 90 seconds.
Well, the idea that people receiving a single piece of paper with maybe 10 or 15 or 20 names, you got a Democrat ballot and then you've got a Republican ballot, and whether they get both of those in the mail is going to determine how they vote just seems pretty silly to me. The way that you reach voters is with regular contact, regular mailings, finding out what issues certain people are interested in, and taking advantage of social media and other methods to drop messages on top of those folks. Dick Wadhams had an editorial this morning. Somebody sent it to me while I was at the office, and he talked about this 1.6 million number of people who are unaffiliated. Truth is, you have maybe 2018 anyway, 35% of registered voters actually participated in the primaries. Those of us who've been on the ground, knocking on doors, making phone calls, doing all of the things that you have to do to try and get people elected and get a chance to talk to Republicans, understand that the vast majority of people are not paying attention to our elections in the primary process. They're just not that interested. I want Republicans who believe in the United States Constitution, who believe in the Republican platform, to be the ones helping us make the decision about who our candidates are going to be.
Next question comes basically from a listener, and they sent it in earlier today, and that is, should we trust the system? Now, you could take it from a big perspective of, look what happened in November, and still, Randy, I know where you stand on what happened with the election fraud. Should we trust this system and what you want to even have happen? Let's start with Randy.
Well, I 100% don't trust the current system. I don't trust Jenna Greswald. I don't trust Dominion voting machines. I would trust a Republican system that Republicans put together. Heck, the grassroots activism that's been influencing the Republican Party for the last 6 years, slowly and surely, getting more and more people with grassroots Republican platform supporting perspective into positions of authority on, for instance, the executive committee and on the central committee. Have managed to create a situation where we will be using paper ballots on Saturday. We don't have to trust an electronic voting system. I'm involved in litigations with regard to the election, defamation. I don't want to go down those rabbit holes. But I do not trust the Democrat Secretary of State, Dominion, or other electronic voting machines to be counting the votes in our Republican primaries.
George?
Well, listen, I don't have any question in my mind that the most hyper-partisan Secretary of State we've ever had is the one who's in the office right now. I think that is undeniable by every single metric out there. However, she has nothing to do with the tabulating of ballots for a primary or a general election. That is left to the county clerks and recorders of the individual counties. And those clerks and recorders are overwhelmingly Republican. And in fact, even in my county, Douglas County, where you fled from, my man, which is really disappointing.
Well,
by the way, the
all
crime
good
rate
things.
But he moved closer to my neighborhood, so he moved up.
You want to start locking the doors.
All good things had to come to an end.
And police up your pets, Randy. But we don't even use Dominion voting systems. But look, the idea here that do I trust it? I trust it for these purposes for sure, but compared to what? What's the system we're going to have and how many people are going to participate? And I think that's the thing that makes this the most questionable for me is in America, you're usually asked to make a choice between A or B, and we're being asked to make a choice between A and some other letter, could be capital, could be lowercase, can't tell you the color of the font, can't tell you the size of the font, but it could be anything we want it to be, but we don't know what it is right now. I don't know that I trust that.
All right. We've got one more question before our first break. We'll get to news and traffic and weather coming up. You're listening to Randy Corporon, George Brauchler, Steffan Tubbs with you. The Colorado GOP primary debate here on 710 KNUS, and greatly appreciate you tuning in. So, final question before we go to the break would be very, I think, simple. And that would be, I'm going to flip it a little bit. What is right about the Colorado GOP right now? Is that tougher than maybe having to answer what's wrong? George, I want to start with you, 90 seconds on what is right with the Colorado GOP right now.
Well, listen, I think ours is still the party of values and of good versus evil and standards. And I also think we're the party that still recognizes, and the Constitution is the best guide for this, is that the process matters. In America, it's not the outcome that drives the process. It's the process that drives the outcome. If our only goal is to achieve justice in some fixed point that we've already found, then how we get there doesn't matter. We don't believe that. If our only goal is to make sure these different types of candidates are the ones who become our nominee, then the process doesn't matter. But here in America, here in Colorado, and for the Republican Party, the process dictates the rightness of the outcome. And I think that's what separates us from the other side. The other side is the ends justify the means, and that's just not us.
Randy, same question.
Well, I'll use my relationship with George as a perfect example. I did not support George when he first ran for DA. I supported his primary candidate, who was a colleague and a friend. I didn't know George. But over the years, through my law practice, got to see how well he ran the DA's office and how people worked under him, and of course gotten to know him politically and in so many other ways. And even though I've disagreed with him sternly on things like the red flag and other very important issues, we have fun like old friends every time we get together. And I don't know if you want to take, since I've got a little time, to talk about what's wrong with the Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, you can take it either way. I mean, and I imagine that may be sadly easier right now.
There are a lot more Republicans who will be at this Central Committee meeting that are interacting and continue to interact with each other like George and I do over many, many years than the kind I'm going to reference right now, which are the Dick Wadhams, who started his editorial this morning name-calling. Despite the potential of Colorado Republican victories in 22, a group of self-proclaimed, quote, principled Republican activists. That is the old guard, old leadership, old consultant Republicans pointing their finger again at the grassroots and saying, you guys don't know what you're talking about, get out of the way. And we're going to put a stop to that if we opt out of the primary and with what we do, whether we opt out or not after.
You see his face right now, Randy?
Look, my only concern about that, and I want Randy to respond to this too, when you talk about the name calling, I didn't hear name calling there, I did hear the quotes, but you look at the emails that have gone out from guys like Representative Dave Williams, Representative Hanks, they come right out and call people like me and people who support us staying in the current system unless there's something better, establishment, liars, ignorant. Those are all out of Dave Williams' emails right there. Party hacks, people who are beholden to high-paid consultants. I mean, if you're looking for name calling, you don't have to rely upon that vague reference to something in quotes. It's really coming from the other side. And instead of us having this civil conversation here, which is great, there are parts of this party that are driving a huge wedge in between it by labeling people. That's Salinesky stuff. That's not what we do in the Republican Party.
Randy, final comment, and we'll take our break.
Darn, I was going to correct
Dang
you.
it.
You know, I've been from the very most grassroots level up to now being the Republican National Committee man for the state of Colorado. I have experienced this scorn and the name calling and look, you've had your primary, now get in line, conversations from the people who've been in charge of this party for decades through my entire almost 12-year activist career now. And I'm done with it, and so are a lot of us.
We will take our first break of the hour. You're listening to a 1-hour Colorado GOP primary debate here on 710 KNUS. George Brauchler, Randy Corporon in studio with us. You can send us, I can't guarantee you'll get your question on, but feel free via the 710 KNUS app. You can send a text message right here to the studio. We are back with George Brauchler, Randy Corporon, live on 710 KNUS next. I got to say, our first segment, I'm a little disappointed. I wanted more. I wanted some yelling. They're sitting next to each other. They're acting nicely. I wanted to ring the boxing bell. Can we get a little more feisty?
We both have law licenses we have to protect.
That's true.
I had asked you for alcohol as a way to keep this thing lively.
I told you, Brauchler, after 6, we open the Jack Daniels.
Don't make me get flirtatious with you on social media. Don't do it.
Thank you. Perfect segue, brother. Give me a little. Speaking of which, just in case you were just tuning in, before we get back to the debate, Tay Anderson, basically, you don't have anything to worry about. The report came out, 96 pages, and basically one or two of the things were, quote, substantiated, but he's going to have a press conference. He's already sent out the little statement that he's been exonerated. And, so be proud. Be very, very proud. Not. All right, we continue. If it's this temperament, gentlemen, that is just fine with me. Again, we've got about 90 seconds for each response if you're just tuning on. And we're talking about what is going to happen on Saturday. How did these rules, Randy, I'll start with you. So take us through, and this won't count against your time, but just real quick, what is going to happen on Saturday, and take us through what needs to happen in order to impact change.
State statute now requires that both parties must opt out of this open primary system if they choose to, and must conduct a vote on it by, I think, October 1st. And in order to successfully opt out, you have to get 75%, not just of the people present at the meeting, but of the entire body, which consists of 527 party officials, chairs, vice chairs, some elected officials, Republican National Committee man and woman, and some bonus members. And so these are the people who will make the decision. And it's virtually impossible. We've had people traveling around the state and talking to groups. People are very supportive of overturning this unconstitutional law. And it seems to us that one of the best steps we can take to try and get the party to take up the issue of overturning this unconstitutional law is to prove after a summer's worth of effort that you can't even get 75% of the Republican National or Central Committee to vote, much less get 75% of the total membership to overturn this thing. So, frankly, we want everybody to vote our way to send a message to the Republican Party that it's time to take the next step and get rid of this unconstitutional law.
George, let's get a reaction to what he just said.
Well, my reaction is, this is the Republican Party. Everybody that was described is going to be there in Pueblo on Saturday. That is the establishment of the Republican Party. By definition, they are all the elected officials, all the leaders of the party. That is the party establishment. You don't have to convince them. they decide who the leadership is. This doesn't require any other convincing. As far as whether it's constitutional or not, I don't know. I'm less concerned with that than I am with the idea that we're about to disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of Republican voters out there who want to play in our primaries, who have played historically in our primaries. But I'll tell you where I really draw the line. I refuse to participate in a process that is going to disenfranchise 9,000 or more military members and their families overseas. And that's what happens if we leave this process right now. We can say, hey, we can try to come up with something, but here's what we know. In 2018, over 15,000 played in the Republican primary. 9,000 of them were registered Republicans that are military members and their families. If we leave this process, and we cannot guarantee that they will be able to play an active role at every stage of this in the primary, we have just cut off the people that we are most duty-bound to see participate in these elections. I refuse to endorse a process like that.
George Brauchler, Randy Corporon here. We are all used to radio. We welcome those of you watching on YouTube, Facebook, and at our website, 710knus.com. This is where you look in the camera and say, hi, Mom.
Hi, honey.
Hi, honey. All right.
My mom passed away this year.
YouTube, and condolences. YouTube, Facebook, 710knus.com for live streaming audio. All right. This is just from me. If I'm tuned into this, and two guys that I like and love both of you, but I hear this just uncertainty, and I'm going, why do I even want to vote coming up when it doesn't seem like we're all one team here? That there's some differences and there's disagreements, I'm sure, within the Democratic Party, but they do a really good job of, maybe they just avoid debates like this or chances to talk. When do we get to that point where we got to just, forget this kind of stuff? Let's move on and focus on, how about getting more people knocking on doors, that kind of thing. George, the question would be, is this good for the betterment of what we're trying to do and be a united party?
Well, listen, first off, you asked me before what I think the strengths of our party are. This is one of them, too, is that we are an iron sharpens iron party. We are not a party of let's go back into some smoke-filled room and pick our nominee and send them out there and tell everybody else that they got to get behind them. We don't do that. I wouldn't want to be part of a party that does that. In fact, had I done that, I wouldn't be the district attorney now. I mean, if you remember, I'm one of the original outsiders. In 2008, I primaried the sitting Republican incumbent DA whose husband was the chairman of the party. So I only get to do that if I'm able to petition on outside of the assembly process. And had I not done that in 2008, I'm not the DA. But I think the broader question is, we get to this point by acknowledging the fact that we don't make ourselves stronger by circling the wagons and pulling in the number of people who can participate in our nomination process to a select handful of people who can figure out how to get to a school cafeteria at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday someday. We got to do better than that. And in modern America, modern Colorado, we can. That's not to say I'm endorsing this great process we have now as the one that can never be changed. But if I'm being asked to give up the you-go on stage for what's behind door number 2, I got to know what's behind door number 2. And we don't know that right now. I'd love to hear that.
Let's get to Randy.
Well, so many things there. To not trust the ability of the party to fashion a system if it's freed from the constraints of this unconstitutional limitation on what we can and can't do. I mean, why are we even elected into positions of leadership at all? The time to bring the Republican Party together is after this assembly, after we make these decisions, and then as we work toward our primary. That is clearly and simply going to happen. It's concerning to me that George would make light of, I'm not so concerned about the constitutionality of it. If we're not the party that stands on what's constitutional and what isn't, then we've already lost the primary purpose of having an opposition party to the winner-take-all, anything-goes Democrats. And what we do know for sure, whether you can look behind a curtain or not, is what's happened with what we have going on right now, is we've opened up the door for dark money. Catherine Murdoch, the daughter of Rupert Murdoch, pumped hundreds of thousands of dollars into Colorado primaries. And what we've been able to watch in our very own state house in those races that we have won is that the Republicans that have gotten elected have gotten steadily and steadily more, quote, moderate, more liberal. We've gone from having A's in the state house on their voting records to F's in the state house on their voting records. That doesn't work for me.
Randy Corporon, George Brauchler here with us in studio for the Colorado GOP primary debate. The event is coming up, as George mentioned, in Pueblo on Saturday. And welcome to those of you listening live on the radio and maybe later via podcast. And as we are live streaming right now on YouTube, Facebook, the 710 KNUS Facebook page, and the station's website, 710KNUS.com. This comes from one of our listeners, gentlemen, and we'll start with George. If Lauren Boebert ran for statewide office, wouldn't that motivate Democrats and independents to vote for her opponent to try to eliminate her in the primary?
No, not at all. In fact, Lauren is a fantastic congressional representative for that 3rd congressional district and does great. But that same success she experiences in the 3rd CD would be incredibly difficult to replicate in Denver, in Boulder, in Broomfield, in Adams County, Jefferson County. No, I don't think so at all. But I also don't think whatever their efforts were would dwarf what has happened. I mean, look, she's a perfect example. She went through the assembly process. She won an open primary. This is somebody with no background. She was the outsider. The establishment guy, like the ones who will be voting on Saturday, that was Scott Tipton, and she defeated him. That only happens in this kind of a process. What concerns me most, and I just want to correct one thing. When I said I'm not so concerned with the constitutionality of it, is it's not that I don't care about the Constitution. It's that for purposes of this debate, whether it's 50%, 66%, or 75%, I don't care. I'm opposed to this idea at every level of measure for voting. But this idea that outside money has come in to tip the scales, I'm going to have to see proof, because we hear about this boogeyman all the time. Where's the evidence? And it can't just be that somebody said once we did it, or we know that so-and-so spent. All this money is out there somewhere. Show me where it was spent to upend a race. Show me how it impacted a race.
Randy, 90 seconds.
Well, I wish I could think of the name of the dark money group that pumped money into, I'll use Justin Everett as an example. His very moderate Republican opponent received infusions of cash into his campaign, while Justin Everett, an A-plus voter who read all the bills and stayed up late and got up early to do his job the way it's supposed to be done, and raised a respectable $100,000 or so for his campaign, got wiped out by the establishment money and by this dark money. As Republican National Committee man, I've had conversations with leaders such as in Alaska, and Catherine Murdoch has taken her this same process to Alaska, this same money, and they've now gotten into an open primary in Alaska, and the leadership there is terrified about it. The next step is this ranked choice voting, where you'll be able to vote for multiple candidates for a single race. This is part of a Democrat scheme, and what kills Republicans over time is that we don't recognize incrementalism and we don't stop it when we have the chance. We're facing an incredibly unconstitutional law. The precedent is there. The attorney for the Colorado GOP on George's show talked about it likely being unconstitutional. It's been litigated in California. We can win that debate and get out from under this process and reopen a primary to all Republicans that only Republicans can contribute to the decision on who we're going to elect.
George Brauchler, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, listen, I didn't hear any evidence that Catherine Murdoch or some other Democrat or super liberal or Soros group has done this. We all talk about it. We all speculate about it. We're all certain that they're back there doing that. I don't know what the name of the third-party group is either. But how do you know it's not another group backed by other Republicans who just prefer Colin Larson's ideology to our friend, and he's my friend, Justin Everett's? I mean, this idea that there has to be a boogeyman out there, that we have to pull up the gates and keep people from participating because they're out there to try to ruin our fun. I need to see evidence of that, because it seems to me that what could be happening here is you have a different group of Republicans who are out there spending money to advance the Republican they like better than the other one. And this use of this term establishment money is fake, because establishment is who's in the party leadership. I mean, Randy, you are establishment. When I was an elected official in the Republican Party, I was establishment. But you can't be on the inside of the party making decisions about who's the leadership of the party and then claim everybody outside the party's establishment. That doesn't make sense.
We got a break coming up, but Randy, I'll give you the final word this segment.
Well, you can't be on the inside of the Republican Party and look at how we've done things for the last 15, 18 years and think that all of that doesn't need to change. And I wish I'd thought about bringing the records for all of the money going in. But I'll tell you what, I won't out one of the top Democrat operatives in the state, but they know they own the Republican Party right now because they will play in our primaries. If it's a strong Republican seat, they'll support the moderate candidate to help further their agenda. And if it's a Democrat seat, obviously, then they'll just throw a ton of money at the Republican. If you're inside watching what's going on, it's not hard to see the truth.
We will take our break. One more segment with George Brauchler, Randy Corporon for the Colorado GOP primary debate. We'll take a break for news, and when we come back, we will wrap things up. Still chance for you to get a suggested question into this, and we should do this actually more. Very, very good to have these gentlemen in studio. Let's take a break now on 710 KNUS. Colorado GOP primary debate. We got to do this more. I mean, what they're paying us, I mean, we owe it to the station, guys.
Paid?
Randy Corporon, George Brauchler here. Thank you to Mark Crowley for putting us up on YouTube, Facebook, 710knus.com, the KNUS Facebook page as well. And I don't care. I'm not going to ask permission. We are talking in discussions with somebody, probably internally, that we're going to put this show on, as well as Peter Boyle's show in the morning, on streaming video. So they said that they would never do that for the Saturday morning shows.
Good call.
I don't want to dress up anyway.
Yeah. You just wear a hat. Nobody cares. So George Brauchler, Randy Corporon here, both of them terrific radio hosts, starting at 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. with George Brauchler, The George Show, and, of course, Wake Up with Randy Corporon, 9 to noon every Saturday. What is the future? There's just not enough time to really do a lot of these issues justice, but what is the future right now? If you get your way, Randy Corporon, what is the future of the Colorado GOP?
Well, a wide open slate. You know, George brought up Scott Tipton, who didn't go through the assembly process. He petitioned onto the ballot because he did not want to face the voters. And Lauren Boebert did what Republicans should do, which is go to the voters and talk to people and meet people and inspire with your vision and all of those kinds of things. You saw I got my laptop. It's Unite America. And their Colorado version, Unite Colorado, that pumped a ton of money into our elections.
Who are they?
They're very similar. They're one of those groups of Republicans and Democrats and unaffiliateds that just want America to be better. They remind me of no labels Republicans who stand for nothing except compromise. And compromise for Republicans always means moving to the left. So we need to have the opportunity to have people who don't care about the Republican Party out of picking who our candidates are, and then let's let good candidates and an energized Republican Party bring them home to victory.
George, same question. If you got your way, what is the future of the Colorado GOP?
I think we continue to grow the party that we have tried to. We continue the outreach and try to increase voter participation for all the voters that are getting ballots. We continue to work on that growing part of the electorate that is absolutely indispensable to victory in every single race, and that's the unaffiliateds. And I just don't think you do that by cutting them off and saying, hey, we don't care about your opinion in our candidate selection, but once we've picked one for you, by God, you should jump on board and support them. I don't think that's the way to do it. One, I do respect that you went out and found whoever this Unite thing is, but I got to know who's funding them. We can't just say it's Unite and therefore they are progressive, they are left, and turn this into a discussion about how they're trying to attack it. If it's other Republicans, I think that's a different analysis. Nothing about this process, Steffan, is going to change the campaign finance laws. Nothing is going to change the ability for one party to play in another party's assembly or primary. And as a quick correction, Scott Tipton did not go to the assembly because he was trying to avoid the voters. He actually went through the process that had him going to more voters and more Republicans, and they rejected him in favor of Lauren Boebert.
Thank you, Greg. Response, Randy.
Well, number one, it's a red herring. In any system that Republicans will come up with, people will have an opportunity, if they're unaffiliated, to go ahead and register as Republicans. If they want to participate with our party, then they ought to at least register with our party. And I would say Tipton dodged the Republicans who would be making that selection, which is what a lot of these establishment candidates do. Walker Stapleton did not go through the assembly. He had to petition on. You just look at the history of this party, and year after year after year, we're losing members. And the people I meet, I had a guy at the Tea Party meeting last night, and he said, I heard George Bush's speech on the other night when we were doing all the 9/11 memorials, and he equated the protesters on January 6th to the Taliban. And he said, that's why I'm done with the Republican Party. I am sick of Republicans who don't stand up for Republican values and other Republicans.
We've got,
Just quick word.
Yeah, go ahead.
Walker won the assembly. He started a petition, he abandoned it, and he won the assembly in 2018.
All right.
That's right. He had the legal problem with the petitions. Yeah.
Real quick, I want to give you guys at least a minute to have your closing comments. In less than 30 seconds, can anybody right now that we know of that they've thrown their hat in the ring to try to defeat Jared Polis, can anybody in the GOP do that right now in your estimation? Start with George.
Yeah, I do. I think so. I mean, look, the biggest hurdle is going to be the $8 trillion this guy has. Remember, he was the architect behind Amendment 41, which said you and I can only give $50 a person to a candidate, but if you're a self-funder, it's unlimited. Yeah. And so he created that for himself. I do think that's surmountable, though, especially when you look at what's gone on with crime, with the economy, 36th now, as opposed to number 1 when the guy had the helm. The amount of crime that's going on everywhere, I do think it's possible to defeat him.
Randy?
Well, as National Committee man, I can't pick sides in primaries, so I wouldn't name any names, but I think George nailed it, and this is a reason why we don't need non-Republicans participating in the Republican Party. Once the Republican establishes a candidate, number one, if we do it at Assembly, we'll have 2 extra months to campaign for that person to campaign unopposed. And we'll be able to use all of these issues, which I expect to get nothing but worse under Biden, under Polis, as we head into that election next year.
All right, let's go with closing comments. We'll start with George.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I will not support a system that disenfranchises my brothers and sisters in uniform overseas or their family members, and that's what this process is likely to do. But here's what I'll do with the rest of my time. I'll cede it to Randy for him to try to address this one question. We know if this thing fails and we stay in the current system exactly how the primary is going to work. How will it work if we opt out? Tell us, not what could be. What will it look like come November 2022?
Yeah, Randy got a minute.
Well, I don't believe that's the end of the debate because we're bringing a resolution after this vote, whether it occurs or not. I don't think it will because we won't have 75%. Whether it occurs or not, we're bringing a resolution to instruct the Republican Party to sue and overturn this unconstitutional law. But I would just end by saying, you're going to have to pick your battles and know who your friends are. And the people who are supporting this opt-out are people like the vice chair of the Republican Party, Priscilla Ron, Marilyn Harris, the secretary. The chair has to stay neutral. I respect that she's trying to do that. Tom Tancredo supports this effort. I'm the Republican National Committee man. I support this effort. The Denver Post is opposed to this effort. Dick Wadhams is opposed to this effort. I'm sorry to say that George Brauchler is on the list of people who are opposed to this effort. But the people that I've been fighting for the 12 years I've been an activist and now more involved as a party officer, are strongly supporting this effort to get the control of the Republican Party back into the hands of actual Republicans.
Nice job, guys. No blows. No veins out of the necks.
The ADD on this guy, man.
I love you both. Saturdays, The George Show, and Wake Up with Randy Corporon. George Brauchler, Randy Corporon. Thank you. 6 o'clock hour is next.